Yo, what's poppin', gamers? I got a couple news stories for you today, both of which involve animals. So let's get right into this first one here. 80-year-old man pleads guilty to genetically engineering giant hybrid sheep in audacious scheme. So if you head out to Vaughn, Montana, you would find Sun River Enterprises LLC, also known as Shoebarth Ranch, which has been termed an alternative livestock ranch, according to this article. I gotta be honest, I've never once heard of the term alternative livestock. It makes me think of alternative medicine, so I just assume all the sheep they were wearing had like crystal pendants around them to keep the bad energy away. So their big scheme was that they were going to build these giant Captain America sheep and they were going to sell them to these captive hunting facilities. And since these sheep are just so massive, everybody would want them because they would make excellent trophies. But before we do all this, we have to build the sheep. So he decided, alright, let's get parts of the largest sheep in the world, the Marco Polo Argali sheep, which these things are like above 300 pounds a lot of the time. He just shipped them from Kyrgyzstan into the US without declaring the importation. Alright, so once the parts finally got here, they probably passed by that Royal Caribbean World Cruise that's going viral on TikTok now. They took genetic material off of the parts and sent that stuff to a lab. And what they did, they created these cloned embryos in the lab, which were then implanted into the sheep on the ranch. It says here, according to court records, he paid $4,200 deposit for the cloning. I gotta be honest, I expected it to be a lot more than that. Actually, I just looked this up, how apparently if you're not getting like the Balenciaga of cloning services, it's gonna be even cheaper. Like it says here, the average cost is 37 and a half grand. What? Alright, so the cloning was successful and we were able to produce an actual Marco Polo Argani sheep made in the USA, and his name was the Montana Mountain King. That is such an awesome name. And we actually have a picture of this absolute Chad right here. Look at this majestic man. Get him on the cover of GQ. Alright, so we finally entered the final stages of this plan. The king's jizz was used to artificially inseminate a bunch of the female sheep on the ranch so that we could create these giant hybrid sheep that we would sell to these hunting facilities. Oh, and all of those female sheep that were used were also obtained illegally. Alright, man, listen, I respect the hustle, but I feel like it would have been in your best interest to not buy this sheep illegally. If you don't have to rob a bank and then also rob the convenience store. You can just rob the bank, you know? Like maybe, hey, maybe you could have gotten a lighter sentencing if you bought the other female sheep legally. And he was also just breaking laws to move these sheep legally to get these things. He forged veterinary inspection certificates, and he would claim that these are legally permitted species when they weren't. Men forged medical documents to move sheep. This guy was running a sheep cartel, and he wasn't just selling his mutant sheep, he was selling the king's jizz too. This reminds me of a while back there was a listing on Craigslist for multiple gallons of wolf semen. And then in the description of the listing, all it said was, fake or otherwise, if it is you I'm looking for, you'll understand. And he didn't just get material from the Marco Polo sheep, he also got it from the Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep that's apparently in Montana. Also bought illegally, by the way. So yeah, he pled guilty to conspiracy to and substantively violating the Lacey Act, which is just a law that says you can't trade plants or fish or wildlife that was obtained illegally. Alright, anyways, that's where this story ends, but now we're gonna get into the new story, and our previous criminal was caught, but our subject here might still be out there. So in Fukuyama, Japan, there is this metal plant that exists, and then the workers show up, and then they see they have this giant tank of hexavalent chromium with a sheet covering it, but the sheet's not covering it. It was overturned, and then they look on the floor. There are these yellow footprints of an animal leading outside. So somehow a cat came into the plant, and it turned over the sheet covering the tank, fell into the tank, and it got out, and now it's just walking about in Japan. Now the problem is hexavalent chromium is actually a pretty toxic chemical. It can cause like cancer and stuff. So, we basically have a radioactive feline walking about the streets. This is straight up like a Ninja Turtles plotline. Apparently some of the environment officials in the area were like, if you see a cat that it quote appears abnormal, don't touch it, and contact the city if you actually find it so we can apprehend this biohazard that's just wandering our streets. I imagine the cat managed to wash off the chemicals somehow, like maybe it took a dip in a public fountain or something. But if it didn't, can you imagine mating with another cat while you're covered in chemicals? I feel like either both cats would get really, really sick in the process and it would not be fun at all, or maybe we somehow created some sort of super cat. There's this documentary called Wolves of Chernobyl, and it's about how the wolves in the Chernobyl exclusion zone are actually doing really, really well. And one of the reasons given is that they've evolved to survive cancer because they're in, the zone. Like they're in Cancer Central and just thriving. They are living their best lives. Like, I know it's far fetched, but I don't know. I've heard of some wild stuff happening. Maybe we actually did just create a Ninja Turtles villain and it's beefing with Master Splinter as we speak. Shoot, I just remembered during recording this, right at the end, there are actually puppies of Chernobyl. Like, there are dogs that are from the CEZ, and you can just find them. They're just little radioactive puppies. Look at these dudes. And apparently, they're even for sale. Like, they even got spayed and neutered and everything. Do you know how some products are like some assembly required? Well, with these things, it's disassembly not required. They already took the things off for you. This video had a lot of jizz talk in it for some reason. I promise you, if you've randomly found this video, the channel is not usually like this. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, a spokesperson for the metal company that this happened to is like, alright, we're gonna make sure that animals do not enter our factories. We didn't anticipate this happening, but you know what? Now that it's happened, we're gonna fix this problem so that it doesn't happen again. And I'm gonna be real with you, bro. The chances of cats breaking into your establishment will be low, but they will never be zero. Cats are clever little gremlins, and they are just as smart as they are mischievous. Alright, I'm gonna end it there. The moral of the story, cover your toxic chemicals and don't illegally create and subsequently threaten your local ecosystem with your GigaChat sheep.